The sun blazed mercilessly over the cracked earth of New Mexico territory, its rays distorting the air into shimmering waves that made the distant mesas dance like mirages. Samuel Hayes wiped the salt from his brow with a sleeve already stained dark with sweat and dust. His small ranch, if it could be called that, consisted of little more than a weathered cabin, a leaning barn, and 30 acres of stubborn soil that yielded barely enough to keep him and his few cattle alive. At 38, Sam carried the weight of too many harsh seasons in his shoulders and the lines around his eyes. His hands, scarred from barbed wire and rope burns, gripped the fence post he was attempting to straighten. The wood groaned in protest, much like everything else on his property. This was survival, not prosperity, a daily negotiation with an unforgiving land that seemed determined to reclaim what little he had carved from it. The morning had brought news from town that the Apache raids were increasing. Settlers were pulling up stakes, heading back east or north to Colorado, where the gold rush promised easier fortunes. Sam had heard the stories in Murphy's saloon. Whole families found dead, livestock stolen, cabins burned to ash. Yet he remained, not out of courage but out of stubbornness, and the simple fact that he had nowhere else to go. His mare, Constance, nickered softly from the corral, her ears pricked toward the southern hills. Sam followed her gaze, squinting against the glare. Nothing moved in the heat, except the occasional dust devil spinning across the flats. He returned to his work, driving nails into the fence rail with methodical strikes that echoed across the empty land. The first shot cracked like thunder, followed immediately by 2 more. Sam dropped his hammer, his hand instinctively moving to the Colt .45 at his hip. The sounds had come from the direction of Eagle's Rest Canyon, maybe 3 miles south. In this country, gunfire usually meant one of 3 things: hunting, trouble, or death. Given the recent Apache activity, Sam suspected it wasn't hunting. He stood motionless, listening. The wind carried nothing but silence and the distant cry of a hawk circling overhead. After several minutes, he picked up his hammer again, but his movements were now deliberate and watchful. Every few seconds, his eyes swept the horizon, searching for movement or the telltale dust cloud that might signal riders approaching. The second volley came 20 minutes later, a rapid succession of rifle shots, desperate and uncoordinated. Someone was fighting for their life. Sam set down his tools and walked to the cabin, his boots crunching on the dry grass. Inside, he loaded his Winchester .73 and stuffed his pockets with cartridges. His decision was made not from heroism, but from the practical knowledge that in this territory, trouble had a way of finding everyone eventually. Better to meet it on his own terms. He saddled Constance quickly, his movements economical and practiced. The horse sensed his urgency, pawing the ground and tossing her head as he checked the cinch. "Easy, girl," he murmured, swinging into the saddle. "We might be riding into something we can't ride out of." The terrain toward Eagle's Rest Canyon was rough, scattered with sagebrush and dotted with standing stones that looked like ancient sentinels. Sam kept Constance to a steady lope, following game trails and dry washes that provided some concealment. The closer he got to the canyon, the more his instincts screamed warnings. This felt like a trap, the kind of setup that left good men dead in the desert for the coyotes to find. As he crested a low ridge, the scene below stopped him cold. 3 Apache women, each standing well over 6 feet tall with the muscled build of warriors, were pinned down behind a cluster of red rocks. Their attackers, 6 white men in dust-stained clothes, had positioned themselves on higher ground with clear lines of fire. The women's horses lay dead nearby, victims of the opening shots Sam had heard. But these weren't ordinary Apache women. Even from a distance, Sam could see they moved with the fluid grace of trained fighters, their long black hair braided with feathers and beads that caught the sunlight. They were magnificent and terrible, like creatures from the old stories his grandfather used to tell. Each was armed with both rifle and bow, switching between weapons with deadly efficiency as they sought angles to return fire. The men attacking them wore the unofficial uniform of claim jumpers and ranch hands, men who took what they wanted and asked questions later. Sam recognized the type, if not the individuals. They were the kind who saw Apache women as prizes to be taken, not human beings to be respected. One of the attackers stood up behind his position, rifle raised, to take a shot at the closest woman. Without conscious thought, Sam brought his Winchester to his shoulder and squeezed the trigger. The man spun and dropped, clutching his shoulder. The shot echoed off the canyon walls, and suddenly all eyes were on the ridge where Sam sat motionless on his horse. For a heartbeat, time seemed suspended. Then chaos erupted. The remaining attackers swung their weapons toward this new threat, while the three Apache women used the distraction to advance on their tormentors. Sam spurred Constance down the slope, working the lever of his rifle as he rode. The fight was brief, but intense. The Apache women moved like dancers, their tall frames covering ground with surprising speed. Sam found himself fighting alongside them without plan or discussion, united by the simple understanding that the men they faced were the enemy of anyone decent. When the dust settled, 5 of the 6 attackers lay dead or dying. The 6th had taken a bullet through his leg and was crawling toward his horse, leaving a trail of blood on the rocks. The oldest of the 3 women, her face painted with traditional war markings, approached the wounded man with her knife drawn. "Wait!" Sam called out, surprising himself. The woman looked at him with eyes like black obsidian, assessing him as she might a potentially dangerous animal. She was even more imposing up close, nearly 7 feet tall with shoulders that could carry a grown man. Her sisters flanked her, both equally formidable. "He dies," she said in accented but clear English. "They came to take us, sell us like horses." Sam nodded slowly. "I understand. But if you kill him here, the cavalry will come looking. They'll use it as an excuse to hunt your people." The woman studied him for a long moment, her grip on the knife never relaxing. "You are not like them," she said finally. "Why did you help us?" It was a fair question, and Sam found himself without a ready answer. "Because it was the right thing to do," he said finally. "Nothing more complicated than that." She spoke rapidly to her sisters in Apache, their conversation too quick for Sam to follow, even if he had understood the language. The wounded man continued his crawling, whimpering as he went. Finally, the woman sheathed her knife and walked to where their dead horses lay. "I am Ayana," she said. "This is Itzel and Nayeli." She indicated her sisters with a gesture. "We were returning from a sacred place when these men found us. They killed our horses for sport before they began hunting us." Sam dismounted and let Constance drink from a small seep that emerged from the rocks. The situation was becoming more complex by the moment. 3 Apache women, obviously of high rank given their size and bearing, stranded in hostile territory with only his single horse for transportation. "My ranch is 5 miles north," he said. "You're welcome to shelter there while we figure out how to get you home." Ayana translated for her sisters, and their discussion grew animated. Sam caught fragments, his name being repeated, gestures toward him and then toward the northern horizon. Finally, Ayana nodded. "We will come, but we must speak to our father about what you have done. There will be consequences." The word carried weight that made Sam's stomach tighten. "What kind of consequences?" "Our father is Chief Nalnish of the Chiricahua. When he learns that a white man saved his daughters' lives, he must respond according to our laws. Whether that response brings honor or death depends on many things we cannot know yet." Sam felt the ground shift beneath his feet, not literally, but in the way a man feels when he realizes his life has just taken a turn from which there might be no return. He had acted on instinct, following the moral compass his father had instilled in him. Now he was learning that good intentions in Apache country could be as dangerous as bad ones. The journey back to his ranch passed largely in silence. The 3 women took turns riding Constance while the others walked, their long strides easily keeping pace with the horse. Sam found himself studying them covertly, amazed by their physical presence and the easy confidence with which they moved through the harsh landscape. As they crested the final hill before his property, Sam saw riders approaching from the east, 6 mounted men in the blue uniforms of the cavalry. His heart sank. The escaped attacker had reached help faster than expected. "Soldiers," Itzel said, the first word Sam had heard her speak. Her English was heavily accented, but clear. Ayanna moved to Sam's side. "If they find us here, they will assume you are our prisoner, or that you are helping us raid settlements." Sam considered his options, none of them good. If he hid the women and the soldiers discovered them, he would be arrested as a collaborator. If he turned them over, he would be betraying people who had fought beside him. If he tried to send them away, they would likely be caught in the open. "There's a root cellar behind the cabin," he said. "It's not much, but it might keep you hidden until they move on." Nayeli, the youngest of the sisters, spoke rapidly to Ayanna. The conversation was brief but intense. "My sister says we should fight," Ayanna translated. "She says hiding shows weakness." "Your sister is probably right about a lot of things," Sam replied. "But sometimes the strongest thing you can do is survive to fight another day." The soldiers were less than a mile away now, close enough that Sam could make out the lieutenant's bars on the lead rider's shoulders. He made his decision. "Go to the cellar. Stay quiet no matter what you hear. If something happens to me, wait until full dark, then head south toward the Dragoon Mountains. Your people will find you there." Ayanna gripped his arm with surprising gentleness for hands that could wield weapons so effectively. "Why do you risk this for us?" Sam met her eyes, seeing intelligence and strength that reminded him of the granite formations that dotted the desert landscape, beautiful, enduring, and unbreakable. "Because some things are worth the risk," he said simply. The women disappeared behind his cabin, just as the cavalry patrol reined up in his yard. Lieutenant Morrison, a young officer with the kind of mustache that suggested more ambition than experience, dismounted and approached with his hand resting casually on his saber hilt. "Afternoon, Hayes. We're tracking Apache raiders who killed 5 men down at Eagle's Rest Canyon. You hear any shooting earlier?" Sam leaned against his fence post, forcing his voice to remain steady. "Heard some shots. South and east of here. Figured it might be someone hunting. 5 men dead, Hayes, shot to pieces. The one survivor said there were Apache warriors, big ones. Unusually large, according to his description." "That so?" Sam picked up his hammer and pretended to examine the fence rail. "Well, Apache come in all sizes, I suppose." Morrison's eyes swept the ranch, taking in the corral, the cabin, the small fields. "Mind if we have a look around? Standard procedure when we're tracking hostiles." It wasn't really a question. Sam nodded and followed the soldiers as they searched his property with the thoroughness of men who expected to find something. They checked the cabin, the barn, even the small smokehouse where Sam cured his occasional deer. The root cellar door was hidden beneath a pile of old harness and tools that Sam had deliberately arranged to look undisturbed. The soldiers gave it a cursory glance but didn't move the equipment to investigate further. After 20 minutes, Morrison gathered his men. "We'll be patrolling this area for the next few days," he told Sam. "Keep your eyes open and your gun loaded. These particular Apache seem unusually dangerous." Sam watched the patrol ride away, not allowing himself to relax until they were out of sight beyond the eastern hills. Only then did he walk to the back of the cabin and move the equipment covering the cellar door. The 3 women emerged like shadows coming to life in the fading daylight. Ayanna studied his face as if reading the story of what had just occurred. "They suspected nothing," Sam said, "but they'll be back, and others will come looking too." "Then we must leave," Nayeli said, her English better than Sam had expected. "We bring danger to your home." Sam looked around his small ranch, the cabin that had sheltered him through 3 brutal winters, the corral he had built with his own hands, the few head of cattle that represented his entire wealth. It wasn't much, but it was his. "Maybe," he said, "or maybe we find another way." That night, They sat around a small fire in his cabin while the women told him their story. They were indeed the daughters of Chief Nalnish, but they were also warriors in their own right, trained from childhood in both the traditional women's roles and the fighting skills usually reserved for men. Their size was not unusual in their family line. Their grandfather had been known as the Giant and was feared throughout the territory. They had been returning from a vision quest in the sacred caves near Eagle's Rest when the white men had spotted them. The attack had been motivated by greed rather than territorial conflict. Apache women, especially unusual ones, brought high prices in certain markets across the border. Our father sent us on this quest to receive guidance about the coming changes, Ayana explained. The white settlements grow larger every year. The army grows stronger. Our people face choices that will determine our survival. What kind of choices? Sam asked. Itzel, who had been quiet most of the evening, spoke up. Whether to fight until we are all dead, or find ways to live alongside the whites without losing what makes us Apache. And what did your vision tell you? The sisters exchanged glances. That the answer would come from an unexpected source, Ayana said. We did not know until today that the source might be a poor rancher who risks his life for strangers. Sam poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks up toward the smoke hole. I'm not sure I'm anybody's answer to anything. I can barely keep this place running. Perhaps that is why you were chosen, Nayeli said softly. A man who has little but shares it freely. A man who fights not for glory but for what is right. Before Sam could respond, they heard horses approaching. Many horses moving fast. Sam grabbed his rifle and moved to the window while the women took positions around the cabin with the fluid coordination of a practiced team. In the moonlight, Sam counted at least 20 riders surrounding his property. But these weren't cavalry uniforms or the rough clothes of raiders. These were Apache warriors in full regalia, their faces painted for war, their weapons gleaming in the silver light. Father has come, Ayana said simply. The lead rider, a figure of imposing presence even seated on horseback, called out in Apache. His voice carried the authority of absolute command, and Sam didn't need translation to understand that he was being summoned outside. What's he saying? Sam asked. He says the white man who saved his daughters must face judgment according to our law, Ayana replied. He says you must come out alone, or he will assume you hold us captive and act accordingly. Sam looked at the 3 women who had somehow changed his life in the span of a single day. Any advice? Do not show fear, Itzel said. But do not show arrogance either. Our father values courage and honesty above all else. Sam set his rifle aside and walked to the door. As his hand touched the latch, Ayana spoke once more. Whatever happens, Samuel Hayes, know that you have acted with honor. That will not be forgotten. Sam stepped into the moonlit yard, his hands visible and empty. Chief Nalnish sat his horse like a monument carved from living stone, his presence filling the space around him with tangible power. He was tall even for an Apache, easily matching his daughter's impressive height, and his face bore the weathered dignity of a man who had led his people through impossible times. For a long moment, neither man spoke. Sam felt the weight of 20 pairs of eyes studying his every movement, measuring his character by standards he couldn't fully understand. Finally, Chief Nalnish dismounted and walked forward until he stood barely 3 feet from Sam. When he spoke, his English was precise and formal. I am Nalnish of the Chiricahua Apache. You have done something unprecedented. A white man has saved the lives of Apache women without seeking reward or advantage. This creates a debt that must be addressed according to our traditions. Sam found his voice. I didn't do it for any reward, Chief. I did it because it was the right thing to do. Yes, Nalnish said. This is what makes the situation complex. In our law, a man who saves the life of another becomes responsible for that life. When you saved my daughters, you became bound to them and to our people by ties that cannot be easily broken. The chief began walking in a slow circle around Sam, his warriors watching intently. There are several ways this debt can be resolved. You could be adopted into our tribe, taking on the responsibilities and privileges of kinship. You could be given a position of honor among our people, serving as a bridge between our worlds. Or, he paused, letting the unfinished thought hang in the air. Or, Sam prompted, or you could be killed, ensuring that no white man can claim to hold power over Apache lives through his actions. Sam felt his mouth go dry, but he kept his voice steady. And which of these options do you favor, Chief? Nalnish completed his circle and stood facing Sam directly. That depends on your answer to a question I must ask. My daughters tell me you risked everything to help them, expecting nothing in return. But I must know. What do you want from this situation? What do you hope to gain? It was the question Sam had been asking himself since the moment he pulled the trigger on that ridge. What did he want? His old life was already gone. The cavalry would be watching him, his neighbors would be suspicious, and word would spread that Samuel Hayes had been involved with Apache raiders. I want to survive this, he said honestly. I want to keep my ranch if I can, though I'm starting to think that might not be possible. And I want to know that those women are safe, that I didn't just delay their deaths by a few hours. Chief Nalnish nodded slowly. An honest answer, but incomplete. I see in your eyes that there is more, something you have not yet admitted even to yourself. Sam looked past the chief to where his cabin stood, thinking of the three remarkable women inside and the way they had moved through the world with such confidence and strength. He thought of his small, struggling ranch and the lonely years he had spent trying to build something meaningful from this harsh land. I want to be part of something larger than myself, he said finally. I've spent 10 years on this ranch, barely surviving, with no one depending on me and no one I could depend on. Today, for the first time in years, I felt like my life mattered for something beyond just staying alive another day. Chief Nalnish was quiet for a long time, studying Sam's face in the moonlight. Around them, the warriors waited with the patience of men accustomed to their leaders' deliberations. You speak truth, the chief said finally, and truth is sacred to the Apache. Because of this, and because my daughters live while their enemies are dead, I offer you a choice that has never been offered to a white man before. He gestured toward his warriors, and 2 of them came forward carrying what appeared to be a bundle wrapped in elk hide. They unfolded it to reveal an Apache war shirt decorated with symbols Sam didn't recognize. You may join our people as a true member of the tribe, taking the name Ghost Walker, the one who moves between worlds. You would be bound by our laws, protected by our strength, and expected to fight for our survival. Your ranch would become part of our territory, a place where Apache and white could meet in peace. The offer was staggering in its implications. Sam would be giving up his identity as a white man to become something entirely different, something that might not be accepted by either world. And if I refuse? Then you remain Samuel Hayes, poor rancher, and we part as friends. But the debt remains unpaid, and according to our traditions, that means the spirits will demand balance in other ways. Your path would become much harder, though not necessarily shorter. Sam looked at the war shirt, its intricate beadwork catching the firelight. He thought of the cavalry patrols that would keep coming, the suspicious neighbors, the isolation that awaited him if he tried to return to his old life. But more than that, he thought of Ayana's words. Some things are worth the risk. He had risked his life today for strangers, acting on instinct and moral conviction. Now he was being asked to risk his entire identity for the same reasons. If I accept, what happens to my cattle, my land? Your cattle become our cattle, your land becomes our land, but you remain their guardian, responsible for their care and protection. In our way of thinking, true ownership comes from responsibility, not from pieces of paper. And your daughters? Chief Nalnish smiled for the first time, transforming his stern features. My daughters are warriors who choose their own paths, but I suspect they would find Ghostwalker a more interesting companion than Samuel Hayes, poor rancher. Sam reached for the war shirt, then paused. One more question. If I do this, will it help your people? Will it make a difference in the struggle you're facing? Perhaps. A man who can move between worlds might find solutions that warriors cannot. Or he might simply provide a bridge when one is needed. There are no guarantees, Samuel Hayes. Only possibilities. Sam took the shirt, feeling its weight in his hands. Not just the physical weight of leather and beads, but the weight of all the lives and traditions it represented. Behind him, he heard the cabin door open and the soft footsteps of the 3 women joining them in the yard. "I accept," he said, his voice carrying across the silent desert. "I accept the name Ghostwalker and the responsibilities that come with it." Chief Nalnish nodded gravely and began speaking in Apache, his words formal and ceremonial. Sam didn't understand the language, but he felt the power of the moment, the sense of crossing a threshold from which there could be no return. As the ceremony concluded, Ayana stepped forward and placed her hand on his shoulder. "Welcome to the family, Ghostwalker," she said with a smile that transformed her severe features. "I hope you are prepared for a very different kind of life." Sam looked around at the warriors who were now his brothers, the chief who was now his leader, and the 3 remarkable women who had changed his fate with their courage and strength. His small ranch looked the same in the moonlight, but everything else had changed irrevocably. "I don't think anyone can be prepared for this," he said, "but I'm ready to try." As the Apache warriors began to make camp around his property, Sam realized that his days as a poor, lonely rancher were over. What lay ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, uncertainty felt like possibility rather than threat. Chief Nalnish approached him one final time. "The path you have chosen will not be easy, Ghostwalker. You will face challenges from both worlds, whites who see you as a traitor, Apache who question your loyalty. But if you remain true to the principles that led you to save my daughters, you may find that some paths are worth walking regardless of their difficulty." Sam nodded, understanding that this was both a blessing and a warning. He had acted on conscience today, and that single decision had reshaped his entire future. Now he would discover whether the man who could save 3 Apache warriors was strong enough to bridge 2 worlds. The desert wind picked up, carrying the scent of sage and distant rain. Somewhere in the darkness, a coyote called to its pack, and the sound seemed like a promise of adventures yet to come. Sam Hayes was gone, but Ghostwalker had been born, and his story was just beginning.